Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Random and today I'm going to be reading the fanfiction Alternate Perspectives from the Fallen Star series written by Boxmaker. This is a Hermitcraft SMP fanfiction with a rating of mature, and the creator chose not to use any archive warnings, though personally I'd put in graphic depictions of violence for a few scenes. The category for this fic is General, and the featured characters are Etho-Slab, Vintage Beef, B.O.O., Doc M77, Good Times with Scar, Cubfan135, Iscal85, and other original characters. There are no romantic relationships, but the featured platonic relationships are Etho-Slab and Vintage Beef, B.O.O., Etho-Slab and Vintage Beef, Cubfan135, and Good Times with Scar. The additional tags are superpowers, alternate universe superheroes/superpowers, injury, blood and injury, hijinks and shenanigans, drinking, heist, hurt comfort, non-consensual body modification, Etho-centric, oops, I gave him trauma, kidnapping, medical torture, needles. Don't worry, he'll be mostly okay in the long run. These tags make it seem dark, but I promise this is lighthearted. The summary is in the description, and now on to the story. Content warning for drinking. Chapter 10. The countdown begins. 30 hours before the heist. Etho groaned and rolled over to switch off the alarm on his phone. He was too tired and too nervous to even think about going to class today. It was Friday anyways, he had only one class to attend. He rolled over and went back to sleep. 26 hours before the heist. The 5 of them had gathered at ConCorp for one final planning session. Each of them knew what part they would play. Cub had drilled them mercilessly. Scar was as chipper as ever and greeted them warmly as they entered the conference room. Cub sported dark rings under his eyes and sipped a cup of coffee. "I figured it out," Etho announced without preamble. After a week of fruitless attempts, it was a relief to finally have his power under control. He spent the morning walking around the apartment, switching his perspective back and forth to get used to the sensation. Now that he could control it, he really wanted to test the limits and figure out what exactly he was capable of. Unfortunately, he wouldn't have much time before tomorrow. "Did you really?" Cub asked, sounding a bit impressed. Etho responded by switching to third person so they could see his clouded eyes. He covered his eyes firmly with his hand. From his new perspective, he could see Beef and B-Dubs were slightly behind him off to the sides. He could see Scar and Cub as well, though they were a bit further away since they were in front of him. Beef ran through the routine of holding up different amounts of fingers, and Etho announced them aloud. Cub joined in, pointing at random items around the room. Cub nodded approvingly. "That's good. This will be useful tomorrow." "Nicely done," Scar agreed. "We all had complete faith in you," B-Dub said seriously, which led Etho to believe he was joking. He hadn't gotten the chance to tell B-Dubs his advice had actually been somewhat helpful. His pride was getting in the way of admitting it. Etho carefully took a seat, which was still a bit difficult due to the extended vision, but he wanted to get as used to the sensation as possible. His back was to the large glass window, and he turned for a moment so he could see it head on. He stood again, an idea forming in the back of his mind. Keeping the window at his back, he took a few careful steps backwards towards the window. The others watched him from their places at the table with a confused look. Normally, when he backed up against a wall, his vision would slip up against the wall until it eventually flipped around so he was looking at himself from the front. He wondered if the effect would be the same for a glass window since it was transparent. His vision didn't move as he backed up, getting closer and closer to the window. He was now watching himself from the outside of the building, staring at the back of his head through the window. Taking a deeper breath, he tilted his head forward and looked down. The city streets sat directly below him, and he watched people bustle about with unobstructed vision. It was as if he was suspended in midair, hovering next to the building. Their planning session got delayed somewhat, as the group spent the next few minutes checking to see if Etho's vision would ignore the glass table. It did, and the opaque glass doors to the conference room. It did not. Cub took careful notes the entire time, and Etho wondered how they would be at all useful. 24 hours before the heist. Etho nearly fell asleep when Scar and Cub took turns going over the plan one final time. He had heard it at least 10 times before, and it never got more exciting. No matter how much they drilled it in, he knew he was going to forget something, which is why he was glad that Beef would be nagging at him from the car. "One last thing, then," Cub said, grabbing a box from the floor, which Etho hadn't noticed before. He opened the box and pulled out a pair of black gloves and held them out to Etho. "We can't have you leaving fingerprints anywhere." Etho put them on and they fit like a glove. He eyed the rest of the box, which was much too big to contain just a pair of gloves. The next thing Cub pulled out was a pair of steady black cargo pants and a tight, long-sleeved black shirt. "These are mostly for protection. You can wear the shirt under something else. Both are tear and fire resistant to some degree." "Fire resistant?" Etho asked as he ran a finger across the fabric. "You never know what you might run into," Scar replied. If the building got set on fire, then Etho probably had bigger problems to deal with, but he appreciated the thought. Cub had clearly designed them with care. "This," Cub said, holding up a small gray device, "will get you into Iskal's apartment. Just hold the button next to the scanner until the door unlocks. Don't lose it." Etho took it and gently slipped it into his pocket. "What if it doesn't work?" Cub hesitated for a moment. "It will." Etho chose not to argue with him. "You can store the files and whatever else you might need in here," Cub said, pulling out a nondescript black backpack. It was nicer than the one Etho owned, which was falling apart. "This next one I'm not so sure about," Cub said hesitantly. He procured a pair of sunglasses with dark circular frames. The lenses were pitch black and glimmered red when they hit the light just right. Etho had to admit they looked pretty cool. "On one hand, if you're wearing these when you use your power, people won't be able to see your eyes, so they won't be able to tell you're using your power," Cub informed him. "But," Scar interjected, "if someone finds out you're a beacon, they could reason that your power probably has something to do with your vision, or at least affect your eyes in some manner." "I doubt you'll need them," Cub finished, "but they are really cool." Etho nodded and took the glasses reverently. "Thank you, they're really nice." Cub smiled smugly and turned to Scar. "I told you he would like them." Scar raised his hands in surrender. "I saved the lamest thing for last," Cub muttered glumly as he pulled out a red sweatshirt with the logo of some pizza company on the back. "You can wear this over the shirt I gave you and the cargo pants look normal enough." Etho laughed. "Thank you. You guys didn't have to do all of this." Scar grinned at him. "You're breaking into a hitman's apartment for us. The least we could do is make sure you're ready for it." Cub jumped and smacked his forehead, nearly knocking off his glasses. "Wait, I've got one last thing for you. Let me grab it," he yelled as he dashed out of the conference room. Etho glanced at Scar, who looked confused for a moment, and then he nodded to himself knowingly. "Someone's excited," Beef muttered. Cub came dashing into the room a few minutes later, carrying a black box in his hand. He was panting like he had just run a mile, and given the size of the building, Etho guessed that was a probability. "I lied. I saved the best for last." He handed the box to Etho and gestured at him expectantly. Etho opened the box reverently and peered inside, mouth dropping behind his mask. Inside of the box sat a beautiful black gas mask. He pulled it out and held it up, admiring the delicately carved accents in the matte finish. "Can I?" He trailed off at a loss for words. "Try it on," Cub encouraged. He turned around so his back was to the others and pulled off his own mask, fumbling with the straps of the gas mask as he pulled it over his head. It fit nicely, covering the bottom half of his face, just like his mask did. Etho turned around and gave them a grin from beneath the mask. Beat-ups clapped appreciatively, and Cub nodded, admiring his handiwork. I've been working on this for a long time. I never thought it would be useful until you came along. I love it, Etho breathed, not really sure how to properly thank him. You'll get more use out of it than I will. I'm glad you like it, he finished quickly. You look great, Etho, Beef said. But isn't a gas mask a bit obvious? It sort of screams, I'm evil and up to no good. Well, you wouldn't wear it inside, of course, Scar. It's more of a precautionary measure in case you need it. Etho shared a look with Beef, whose eyes widened. Precaution for what? Etho prompted. Scar glanced at Cub, who was avoiding his gaze. Cub, you remember, please don't remind me, Cub muttered. There is a possibility. Spit it out, Scar, Etho pressed, raising his voice ever so slightly. Iskel's apartment may be rigged with knockout gas traps. Etho took a moment to register what Scar had just said. I'm sorry? He asked at the same time Beef yelled. What? Etho wondered how Scar knew that and remembered of him saying that he was old friends with Iskel. He was starting to question Scar's definition of old friend. How the fuck do you know that? Etho questioned. We're old friends, Scar replied, and Etho muttered the same words beneath his breath. Cub snorted and Scar glared at him. We are, he admonished Cub. I don't think he's ever forgiven us. I have had several lovely conversations with him since. The two of them glared at each other, having a silent argument that neither Etho, Beat-ups, or Beef could understand. Cub broke eye contact with Scar and rolled his eyes. The details aren't important. What is important is that you have a gas mask, so you'll be fine. Are there any other unimportant details you want to inform us of? Etho grumbled. Nope, Scar replied cheerfully. Maybe we should go over the plan one more time, Cub began. No! Beat-ups, Etho, and Beef shouted in unison. 20 hours before the heist. Beef was pacing their living room apartment, cursing Scar's name. And he just doesn't even bother to mention the place could be trapped until the day before. What the hell? Etho was sprawled out on the couch, listening to his rant half-heartedly, occasionally muttering in assent. Beat-ups was on the ground in front of him, watching Beef with wide eyes. He didn't blame Beat-ups. Beef could be scary when he was mad. Beef had every right to be mad at Cub and Scar, but none of them could do anything about it. Etho was going through with this. He had already made up his mind, and it was too late to back out now. It wasn't too late to back out now, the cowardly part of his mind suggested. He pushed those thoughts away quickly. The room felt too warm, and Etho was already sick with anticipation. There was no way he was going to get any sleep tonight, which was unfortunate considering tomorrow's task. Beef, I love you, but please shut up. Etho felt a bit bad as Beef guiltily paddled over and sat down next to the coffee table. Sorry, I'm just a bit nervous, Etho said. He clenched his hands into fists just to get them to stop shaking and flipped his vision between perspective a few times, just to make sure he's still good. No, that's my bad. Scar's just a bitch? Beat-ups laughed. Yeah. Beat-ups checked the time on his pocket watch. I should probably get going. We've got a big day tomorrow and all. Stay, Etho said, sitting up from the couch. You can take my bed. I doubt I'll sleep at all. It didn't take much convincing to get Beat-ups to stay the night. 19.5 hours before the heist. Do you have any sixes? B-Dubs asked Beef. Go fish. 19 hours before the heist. If I have to play one more round of Go Fish, Beef ranted. None of us know any other games, genius. B-Dubs snapped back with a grin. Etho stood, back popping as he stretched his arms over his head. He ambled into the kitchen, flicking on the lights. Where are you going? Beef called as he left. Getting snacks, Etho replied, knowing full damn well he would be grabbing more than just snacks. He eyed the cans of fruity alcoholic beverages on the counter. He re-entered the living room with a bag of pretzels, a plate of brownies, and of course, the case of drinks. Dig in, he said with a laugh. If you wake up with a hangover, Beef warned. I won't drink that much, it'll be fine, Etho reassured him, cracking open a can and sliding it into B-Dubs' open hand. This is a terrible idea. 17 hours before the heist. This is great, Beef laughed, passing a half-empty can over to B-Dubs. All of them were carefully teetering on the line of drunk, but not enough to have a severe hangover. Worries about the next day forgotten, they partied into the early hours of the morning. 8 hours before the heist. Etho was jolted awake by the sound of Beef's phone alarm and blearily opened his eyes. Next to him, Beef cursed and turned it off. Belatedly, Etho realized that they had fallen asleep on the couch and glanced to his left, where B-Dubs was still asleep on his shoulder. What time is it? Etho mumbled. 9? I'm going back to bed. Beef flickered his ear and Etho glared at him, realizing that he had lost his mask at some point in the night. You're not ready to go at all. Etho hummed as he tried to wrestle the blankets away from B-Dubs, who had wrapped himself in them. Beef must have left him alone because he woke up an indeterminate amount of time later. B-Dubs was gone and the blanket was tossed over him. He heard low voices coming from the kitchen, so he roused himself from the couch. Morning, he said, making a beeline for the coffee pot. He sat at the table with the other two. Lovely day for a heist, he added conversationally. Beef flickered open the blinds of the window next to the table. It was overcast and drizzling. Yep. B-Dubs was staring at him, but quickly looked away as soon as he was caught. Something on my face, B-Dubs? He teased. Then he realized there was nothing on his face, because he wasn't wearing his mask. Oh, he whispered, feeling a bit self-conscious. B-Dubs covered his eyes. I wasn't looking, I swear, I just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He yelled, making a big deal out of it. It's fine, B-Dubs, you're my friend. B-Dubs peeked between the gaps in his fingers, slowly moving his hands away from his eyes. You have a nice face, he offered. Beef doubled over laughing, and Etho blushed, now wishing that he was wearing his mask. Take me to dinner first, he muttered as B-Dubs spluttered in his own defense. 7 hours before the heist. Beef raced around the apartment, gathering up all the equipment they would need for later today. His laptop was charging and the maps were gathered in a pile next to them. He was messing with the radios and instructed B-Dubs to make a list of things they needed to grab before they left. Etho was in a state of disarray, half dressed in the clothes Cub had given him the day before. He sifted through his drawers, trying to find a clean pair of matching socks. Are my boots out there? He called to Beef. Yes, came from the living room. The bag Cub had given him sat open on his bed as he shoved a flashlight, a bottle of water, and Cub's gloves in. His flash drive and pocket knife made their way into the pockets of his cargo pants, along with the fancy door unlocking device Cub had given him. It was a bit cold outside, so he slipped into his army green jacket, covered in patches of fur along the collar. It looked good with the all-black attire beneath it. The gas mask and sunglasses were shoved in the bag next. He took extra care to put the glasses into their container and position everything so it wouldn't get crushed. He took one last glance around his room to make sure he had everything. His wallet, keys, and phone were purposely left on his desk, so he wasn't carrying any self-identifying information. He was ready. He did not feel ready. He swung into the living room where the other two were bickering. "Damn," Beef said, nodding approvingly when he saw Etho. "You look professional." Etho huffed and grabbed his boots, thumping down on the couch so he could put them on. "I am a professional," he said, slipping his mask back on. Beef shoved a few more things into his bag, which was practically overflowing. B-Dubs had gotten changed at some point and shouldered his much smaller bag. "Come on, you guys are slow." "We're waiting on this guy," Etho replied, gesturing to Beef. "What do you even have in there?" "You never know what you might need," Beef said, yanking the zipper of his bag shut. They left shortly after. None of the other students in their building paid them any mind, but Etho had once watched someone go down the hallway on an armchair with 2 wheels, and no one said a word about it, so it was hard to tell how suspicious they actually looked. "Who's ready for some crime?" Etho asked with a grin as they stepped out in the street. "We are getting ready for the heist." I don't have much to say. I won't say anything. I'll just leave you with anticipation. So right into the credits we go, because this story was not written by me. It was written by Boxmaker on Archive of Our Own. You can find their work there. The fan art used for the video also isn't mine. And some of the sound effects used aren't mine either. You can find proper credits for them in the description. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.